Well, spring is finally here, the trails are nearly dry, and we're itching to ride. But before heading out on your first ride, there are a few quick checks that you should do. Doing these will hopefully ensure your bike runs smoothly and safely throughout the summer months. First off, if your bike is dirty from fall riding, give it a good wash and dry it off. Now we'll start with a good visual inspection from the front of the bike to the back. You'll want to look for any broken bits or cracks and dents in the frame. If you see anything concerning like a crack, it's a good idea to have your local bike shop take a look at it. After that visual inspection, we'll move to the front of the bike and start with the front wheel. Have a look at your tire for tread wear. Check the knobs and look for any cuts or slashes. Now, everyone will have their own threshold for tread wear, but generally if you're missing a few knobs, it's best to go ahead and replace the tire. If your tire is okay, it's also a good idea to top up the sealant because it does dry out over time. To do that, remove the air from the tire. Now, if you have a sealant injector or a syringe, simply remove the valve core and inject the sealant into the stem. But don't worry if you don't have this, because you can simply pop the bead with a tire lever and pour some sealant directly into the tire. Now, one final thing to check with the front wheel is the rim and spokes. Have a look for any major dents or cracks in the rim, or any broken spokes. Any broken spokes will need to be replaced, and if you don't have rim tape and wheel building tools, this is a job best left to the mechanics at your local bike shop. Now we'll also do a rough check for spoke tension. To do this, grab a pair of spokes on one side and give them a squeeze. If you notice any that are looser than others, you can give them a little tightening with a spoke wrench. Just don't get too carried away with this, because you can put your wheel out of dish or introduce a wobble that wasn't there before. Now, everything that we just did with the front wheel, you'll also want to do for the rear wheel as well. Now we'll look at the fork. Now, every brand will have its own service interval. For Fox, it's 30 hours of riding for a lower leg service and 100 hours of riding for a full service. So if those are due, it's recommended that you take it to a professional shop and let them handle it. For now, just have a look at the stanchions for any wear or scratches. If you see wear on your stanchions, it could be a sign that the bushings in your lowers are starting to wear, and you may want to have your local bike shop take a look at it. Also, it's a good idea just to clean up any dirt that's sitting around the dust seals. Now, if you know the air pressure in your fork, you can throw a shock pump on and reinflate. If you don't know the air pressure, you'll set the pressure according to the amount of sag you want, typically around 18% on a fork. Now, as with the front wheel, everything that we talked about for your fork pretty much applies to your shock. Now let's take a look at the brakes. Give the levers a few squeezes to see how they feel. If they're feeling spongy or haven't been bled in 3 to 6 months, you'll want to go ahead and bleed them. This is something you can quite easily do at home if you have a bleed kit, but bleeding brakes well can require a bit of practice. Now let's check the brake pads. So first off, after removing the wheel, remove the pin that holds in the pads and then carefully pull out the pads, ensuring that you don't get any oil on them. Now for pad wear, just compare the thickness of the pad material to the thickness of the backing. If it's roughly half the thickness of the backing, or about 1 millimeter, it's time to replace them. If you do replace your brake pads, just be sure to bed them in before heading down a trail. Now we're also going to check for any play in the headset. If there is, you can loosen your stem bolts and tighten the bolt at the top of the steerer. Usually just a light wrist tightness is good enough. Then tighten up the stem bolts. Now, if there's still play in the headset, or you notice a grinding or notching feeling when lightly turning the handlebars, it could be time to replace the bearings. Next up is the dropper post. Just give it a few actuations to ensure it's working properly. If it's cable actuated and there's a bit of play in the lever, simply turn the barrel adjuster to tighten up the cable and remove any play. Now we can also lubricate the stanchion of the dropper post. Most droppers will have a collar that you can simply unscrew. Once that's off, push down on the seat and then raise. Now you can clean off all of the old grease and apply some new suspension grease. If you find your dropper post a little slow or soft when you sit on it, you may want to check the air pressure in it. So to do this, most droppers have a Schrader valve under the saddle. Take the saddle off, unscrew the cap, and reinflate with the shock pump according to the specs of your particular brand. Now we'll move down to the bottom bracket, and we're just going to do a quick check to make sure the bearings are okay. So to do this, hold the crank horizontally and apply inward and outward pressure. Then do the same with the crank vertically. If you do feel any play there, first try making sure that your cranks are tight. And if they are and the play is still there, it's probably time to replace your bottom bracket. Now let's take a look at the pivot bolts. You just want to make sure that they're snug and not loose. But if you have a torque wrench, take that out and ensure everything is torqued to spec. If you haven't changed the bearings out in a couple of years and you ride in mud or dust a lot, it could be time to replace those bearings. This you can do yourself, and I'll leave a link to a video of it in the description below. Now last but not least, we'll take a look at the drivetrain. We'll begin by checking for chain wear. To do this, we'll use a chain checker, which measures the percentage of chain stretch. Now, if the chain is around 0.5 to 0.75%, it's a good idea to replace it to prevent additional wear to the cassette and chainring. I'll also make sure it's shifting smoothly. Now, if it's not quite upshifting right, or if it's skipping, you may want to tighten the cable at the barrel adjuster. If after adjusting the cable tension it's still skipping, you may want to have a mechanic check your derailleur hanger with an alignment tool. Now, if you find the shift lever a little difficult to press, or if it's slow to downshift, it may be time to replace the cable and even potentially the cable housing. Well, that's a quick summary of pretty much everything I do before heading out on my first ride of the season. Now, if you don't have the tools or confidence to do this yourself, it's a good idea to take it into your local bike shop and let the mechanics there inspect it. So did I miss anything? If so, leave a comment below. I'd like to thank my local bike shop, Rebound Cycle, for letting me use their shop to film this video. Rebound Cycle is located in Canmore, and they're my primary bike shop. Excellent customer service and knowledge, great selection of tires, parts, accessories, and clothing, and they even have rental bikes, so be sure to check them out. Until next time, ride on.